Book 5, Canto 9, The Legend of Artegall. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book 5, The Legend of Artegall. Canto 9. Arthur and Artegall catch guile, whom Talus doth dismay. They to Mercilla's palace come, and see her rich array. What tiger, or what other salvage wight, is so exceeding furious and fell, as wrong when it hath armed itself with might? Not fit mongst men that do with reason mell, but mongst wild beasts and salvage woods to dwell, where still the stronger doth the weak devour, and they that most in boldness do excell, are dreaded most, and feared for their power. Fit for Adicia, there to build her wicked bower. There let her wonne far from the resort of men, where righteous Artegall her late exiled. There let her ever keep her damned den, where none may be with her lewd parts defiled, nor none but beasts may be of her despoiled. And turn we to the noble Prince, where late we did him leave, after that he had foiled the cruel Soldan, and with dreadful fate had utterly subverted his unrighteous state. Where having with Sir Artegall a space well solaced in that Soldans late delight, they both resolving now to leave the place, both it and all the wealth therein behight, unto that damsel in her lady's right, and so would have departed on their way, but she them wooed by all the means she might, and earnestly besought to wend that day with her, to see her lady thence not far away. By whose entreaty both they overcomen, agree to go with her, and by the way, as often falls, of sundry things did comen, mongst which that damsel did to them bewray a straunge adventure, which not far thence lay, to wit a wicked villain, bold and stout, which wonned in a rock not far away, that robbed all the country thereabout, and brought the pillage home, whence none could get it out. Thereto both his own wily wit she said, and eke the fastness of his dwelling place, both unassailable, gave him great aid. For he so crafty was to forge and face, so light of hand, and nimble of his pace, so smooth of tongue, and subtle in his tale, that could deceive one looking in his face. Therefore by name Malingin they him call, well knowen by his feats, and famous over all. Through these his sleights he many doth confound, and eke the rock, in which he wonts to dwell, is wondrous strong, and hewen far under ground a dreadful depth, how deep no man can tell, but some do say it goeth down to hell, and all within it full of windings is, and hidden ways, that scarce an hound by smell can follow out those false footsteps of his, ne none can back return, that once are gone amisse. Which when those knights had heard, their hearts gan earne to understand that villains dwelling place, and greatly it desired of her to learne, and by which way they towards it should trace. Were not, said she, that it should let your pace towards my lady's presence by you meant, I would you guide directly to the place. Then let not that, said they, stay your intent, for neither will one foot, till we that carle have hint. So forth they passed, till they approached nigh unto the rock, where was the villains won. Which when the damsel near at hand did spy, she warned the knights thereof, who thereupon gan to advise what best were to be done. So both agreed to send that maid afore, where she might sit nigh to the den alone, wailing and raising pitiful uproar, as if she did some great calamity deplore. With noise, whereof when as the caitiff carles should issue forth, in hope to find some spoile, they in await would closely him ensnarle, ere to his den he backward could recoyle, and so would hope him easily to foyle. The damzell straight went, as she was directed, unto the rock, and there upon the soyle, having herself in wretched wise abjected, gan weepe and wayle, as if great griefe had her affected. The cry whereof entring the hollow cave, eftsoons brought forth the villaine, as they ment, with hope of her some wishfull boote to have. Full dreadfull wight he was, as ever went upon the earth, with hollow eyes deepe pent, and long curled lockes, that downe his shoulders shagged, and on his back an uncouth vestiment made of straunge stuffe, but all too worne and ragged, and underneath his breech was all too torne and jagged. And in his hand an huge long staffe he held, whofe top was armed with many an iron hooke, fit to catch hold of all that he could weld, or in the compass of his clouches tooke. And ever round about he cast his looke, als at his back a great wide net he bore, with which he seldom fished at the brooke, but used to fish for fooles on the dry shore, of which he in faire weather wont to take great store. Him when the damzell faw fast by her side, so ugly creature she was nigh dismayd, and now for helpe aloud in earneft cried. But when the villaine faw her so affrayd, he gan with guilefull words her to perfwade, to banifh feare, and with Sardonian smile, laughing on her his falfe intent to fhade, gan forth to lay his bait her to beguile, that from herfelfe unwares he might her fteale the while. Like as the fowler on his guilefull pipe charmes to the birds full many a pleasant lay, that they the whiles may take less heedy keepe, how he his nets doth for their ruine lay. So did the villaine to her prate and play, and many pleasant trickes before her fhow, to turne her eyes from his intent away. For he in fleights and juggling feates did flow, and of legerdemaine the myfteries did know. To which the whileft fhe let her intentive mind, he fuddenly his net upon her threw, that overfpred her like a puffe of wind, and fnatching her foone up, ere well fhe knew, ran with her faft away unto his mew, crying for helpe aloud. But when as nigh he came unto his cave, and there did view the armed knight stopping his paffage by, he threw his burden downe, and faft away did fly. But Artegall him after did purfew, the whiles the Prince there kept the entrance ftill. Up to the rock he ran, and thereon flew, like a wild goat, leaping from hill to hill, and dauncing on the craggy cliffes at will. That deadly daunger feemed in all mens fight to tempt fuch fteps, where footing was fo ill. Ne aught availed for the armed knight to think to follow him, that was fo fwift and light. Which when he faw, his iron man he fent to follow him, for he was fwift in chace, he him purfewed, wherever that he went, both over rockes and hills, and every place, wherefo he fled, he followed him apace, so that he shortly forced him to forsake the height, and downe descend unto the bafe. There he him courfed afrefh, and foone did make to leave his proper forme, and other fhape to take. Into a fox himfelfe he firft did turne, but he him hunted like a fox full fast. Then to a bufh himfelfe he did transforme, but he the bufh did beat, till that at laft into a bird it chaunged, and from him paft, flying from tree to tree, from wand to wand, But he then stones at it so long did cast, That like a stone it fell upon the land. But he then tooke it up, and held fast in his hand. So he it brought with him unto the knights, And to his lord Sir Artegall it lent, Warning him hold it fast, for feare of sleights. Who whilest in hand it griping hard he hent, Into a hedgehog all unwares it went, And pricked him so, that he away it threw. Then gan it run away incontinent, Being returned to his former hew. But Talus soon him overtooke, and backward drew. But when as he would to a snake again Have turned himself, he with his iron flaile Gan drive at him, and with so huge might and maine, That all his bones as small as sandy graile He broke, and did his bowels disentraile, Crying in vaine for help, when help was past. So did deceit the self-deceiver faile. There they him left a carrion outcast, For beafts and fowles to feed upon for their repast. Thenceforth they passed with that gentle mayd To see her lady, as they did agree. To which when they approched, thus she sayd: Lo now, right noble knights, arrived ye be Nigh to the place where ye desired to see. There shall ye see my soveraine Lady Queene, Most facred wight, most debonaire and free, That ever yet upon this earth was feene, Or that with diadem hath ever crowned beene. The gentle knights rejoyced much to heare The praifes of that Prince fo manifold, And passing little further common were, Where they a stately palace did behold, Of pompous fhew much more then fhe had told, With many towers and terrace mounted high, And all their tops bright gliftering with gold, That feemed to outfhine the dimmed sky, And with their brightnefle dazed the ftraunge beholders eye. There they alighting by that damzell were Direded in, and shewed all the fight, Whofe porch, that moft magnifique did appeare, Stood open wide to all men day and night, Yet warded well by one of mickle might, That fat thereby with giant like refemblance, To keep out guile and malice and defpight, That underfhew oft times of feigned femblance, Or wont in Princes courts to worke great fcath and hindrance. His name was Awe, by whom they passing in Went up the hall, that was a large wide roome, All full of people making troublous din, And wondrous noyfe, as if that there were fome, Which unto them was dealing righteous doome. By whom they passing through the thickeft prefle, The marfhall of the hall to them did come. His name hight Order, who commanding peace, Them guided through the throng, that did their clamours ceafe. They ceafed their clamours upon them to gaze, Whom feeing all in armour bright as day, Straunge there to fee, it did them much amaze, And with unwonted terror half affray. For never faw they there the like array, Ne ever was the name of warre there fpoken, But joyous peace and quietnefle alway, Dealing juft judgments, that mote not be broken, For any bribes, or threats of any to be wroken. There as they entred at the fcreene, They faw fome one, whofe tongue was for his trefpaile vile Nailed to a poft, adjudged fo by law, For that wherewith he falfely did revile, And foule blafpheme that Queene for forged guile, Both with bold fpeaches, which he blazed had, And with lewd poems, which he did compile. For the bold title of a Poet bad He on himfelfe had ta'en, and rayling rhymes had fprad. Thus there he stood, whileft high over his head There written was the purport of his fin, In cyphers ftrange, that few could rightly read. Bon fons, But bon that once had written been was raced out, and mal was now put in. So now malfont was plainely to be read, either for the evill which he did therein, or that he likened was to a wellhead of evill words and wicked flaunders by him shed. They passing by were guided by degree unto the presence of that gracious Queene, who sat on high, that she might all men see, and might of all men royally be seen, upon a throne of gold full bright and sheene, adorned all with gemmes of endless price, as either might for wealth have gotten been, or could be framed by workmans rare device, and all embossed with lions and with fleur de lis. All over her a cloth of ftate was spread, not of rich tissue, nor of cloth of gold, nor of aught else that may be richeft read, but like a cloud, as likest may be told, that her broad fpreading wings did wide unfold, whofe skirts were bordred with bright funny beames, gliftring like gold, amongft the plights enrold, and here and there fhooting forth filver ftreames, mongft which crept little angels through the glittering gleames. Seemed thofe little angels did uphold the cloth of ftate, and on their purpled wings did beare the pendants through their nimblesse bold, befides 1,000 more of fuch, as fings hymnes to high God, and carols heavenly things, encompaffed the throne on which fhe sat, she angel like, the heire of ancient kings and mighty conquerors, in royal ftate, whileft kings and Caefars at her feet did them proftrate. Thus fhe did fit in foveraine majefty, holding a scepter in her royal hand, the sacred pledge of peace and clemency, with which high God had bleft her happy land, maugre fo many foes, which did withftand. But at her feet her fword was likewife layd, whofe long reft rufted the bright fteely brand, yet when as foes enforced, or friends fought ayd, She could it fternely draw, that all the world difmayd. And round about before her feet there sat a bevy of faire virgins, clad in white, that goodly feemed t'adorne her royal ftate, all lovely daughters of high Jove, that hight Letae by him begot in loves delight, upon the righteous Themis. Thofe they say upon Joves judgment feat wait day and night, and when in wrath he threats the worlds decay, they do his anger calme, and cruel vengeance ftay. They alfo do by his divine permission upon the thrones of mortal princes tend, and often treat for pardon and remission to fuppliants through frailty which offend. Thofe did upon Mercilles throne attend, just Dice, wife Eunomie, mild Irene, and them amongft her glory to commend, fet goodly Temperance in garments cleane, and sacred Reverence, yborne of heavenly ftreme. Thus did fhe fit in royal rich eftate, admired of many, honored of all, whileft underneath her feet there as fhe sate, an huge great lion lay, that mote appall an hardy courage, like captived thrall, with a ftrong iron chaine and collar bound, that once he could not move, nor quich it all. Yet did he murmur with bellions found, and softly royne, when falvage choler gan redound. So fitting high in dreaded soveraignty, thofe two ftrange knights were to her prefence brought, who bowing low before her majefty, did to her mild obeifance, as they ought, and meekeft boone, that they imagine mought. To whom fhe eke inclining her withal, as a faire ftoupe of her high foaring thought, a cheerefull countenance on them let fall, yet tempred with fome majefty imperiall. As the bright funne what time his fiery team towards the western brim begins to draw, 'gins to abate the brightness of his beam, and fervour of his flames somewhat adaw. So did this mighty lady, when she saw those two strange knights such homage to her make, bate somewhat of that majesty and awe, that whilome wont to do so many quake, and with more mild aspect those two to entertake. Now at that instant, as occasion fell, when these two stranger knights arrived in place, she was about affairs of common weal, dealing of justice with indifferent grace, and hearing pleas of people mean and base. Mongst which as then there was for to be heard the trial of a great and weighty case, which on both sides was then debating hard. But at the sight of these, those were a while debarred. But after all her princely entertaine, to the hearing of that former cause in hand, herself eftsoons she gan convert againe, which that those knights likewise mote understand, and witness forth aright in foreign land, taking them up unto her stately throne, where they mote hear the matter throughly scand. On either part she placed the one on the one, the other on the other side, and near them none. Then was there brought, as prisoner to the bar, a lady of great countenance and place, but that she it with foul abuse did mar, yet did appear rare beauty in her face, but blotted with condition vile and bafe, that all her other honour did obfcure, and titles of nobility deface. Yet in that wretched femblant she did fure the peoples great compaffion unto her allure. Then up arofe a perfon of deep reach, and rare infight, hard matters to reveale, that well could charme his tongue and time his fpeach to all affayes. His name was called Zeale. He gan that lady ftrongly to appeale of many haynous crimes, by her enured, and with sharp reafons rang her fuch appeale, that thofe, whom she to pity had allured, he now t'abhorre and loath her perfon had procured. Firft gan he tell, how this, that feemed so faire and royally arrayd, Duessa hight, that falfe Duessa, which had wrought great care and mickle mischiefe unto many a knight, by her beguiled, and confounded quite. But not for thofe she now in question came, though alfo thofe mote questioned be aright, but for vilde treafons and outrageous fhame, which she against the dread Mercilla oft did frame. For she whilome, as ye mote right well remember, had her counsels falfe conspired with faithlefle Blandemore and Paridel, both two her paramours, both by her hired, and both with hope of fhadowes vaine inspired, and with them praftifed, how for to deprive Mercilla of her crowne, by her afpired, that she might it unto herfelfe derive, and triumph in their blood, whom she to death did drive. But through high heavens grace, which favour not the wicked drifts of traitorous defignes gainft loyall Princes, all this curfed plot, ere proof it tooke, discovered was betimes, and the actors won the meed meet for their crimes. Such be the meed of all, that by such meane unto the type of kingdoms title climes. But falfe Duessa, now untitled Queene, was brought to her fad doome, as here was to be feene. Strongly did Zeale her haynous fact enforce, and many other crimes of foul defame against her brought, to banifh all remorfe, and aggravate the horror of her blame. And with him to make part against her came many grave perfons, that against her pled. Firft was a fage old fire, that had to name the kingdom's care, with the white silver head, that many high regards and reasons gainst her read. Then gan authority her to oppose, with peremptory power that made all mute, and then the law of nations gainst her rose, and reasons brought that no man could refute. Next gan religion gainst her to impute high Gods beheast, and power of holy laws. Then gan the peoples cry, and commons suit importune care of their own public cause, and lastly justice charged her with breach of laws. But then for her on the contrary part rose many advocates for her to plead. First there came Pity with full tender heart, and with her joyned regard of womanhead. And then came Danger threatning hidden dread, and high alliance unto foreign power. Then came Nobility of birth, that bred great ruth through her misfortunes tragic stowre. And lastly griefe did plead, and many teares forth pour, with the neare touch whereof in tender heart the Briton Prince was sore impassionate, and walks inclined much unto her part, through the sad terror of so dreadful fate, and wretched ruine of so high estate, that for great ruth his courage gan relent, which when as zeale perceived to abate, he gan his earnest fervour to augment, and many fearfull objects to them to present. He gan to efforce the evidence anew, and new accufements to produce in place. He brought forth that old hag of hellish hew, the cursed Ate, brought her face to face, who privy was and party in the cafe. She, glad of spoile and ruinous decay, did her appeach, and to her more disgrace the plot of all her practice did display, and all her traines, and all her treasons forth did lay. Then brought he forth with grisly grim aspect abhorred Murder, who with bloody knife, yet dropping frefh in hand, did her detect, and there with guilty bloodshed charged rife. Then brought he forth Sedition, breeding strife in troublous wits, and mutinous uprore. Then brought he forth incontinence of life, even foul adultery her face before, and lewd impiety, that her accused sore. All which, when as the Prince had heard and seen, his former fancies ruth he gan repent, and from her party eftsoons was drawen clean. But Artegall with constant firm intent, for zeale of justice was against her bent, so was she guilty deemed of them all. Then zeale began to urge her punishment, and to their Queene for judgment loudly call. Unto Mercilla mild for justice gainst the thrall. But she, whose princely breast was touched neare with piteous ruth of her so wretched plight, though plaine she saw by all that she did heare, that she of death was guilty found by right, yet would not let just vengeance on her light, but rather let instead thereof to fall few pearling drops from her faire lamps of light, the which she covering with her purple pall, would have the passion hid, and uparose with all. End of Canto 9, Book 5. The Legend of Artegall.